Hello, folks. Hello. Thank you for checking in with us. And today, I am sitting in with the one and only Mr. George Leacock. Who is George Leacock? He is the owner and managing director of Radio Tambrin, the largest in Tobago. Check it out. Hi. Welcome to Season 11's Hard Issues episode, which is brought to you by Caribbean Airlines, number one. And we're shining light on Mr. George Leacock, advocate for many of our hard issues concerns, and you know them well, owner, managing director, media director of Radio Tambrin, sports manager, and award recipient. So, please do as you do. Like, follow, share, subscribe, drop a comment. And don't forget to check us out on our membership page. That's how we gain your support. And that's how you help us move along. And it's only offered on our website, purely, simply for you. And we're going to do, as we do, we're going to get to know a little bit about Mr. George Leacock. Tobago-born George Leacock has been an advocate for the abused, the addicted, and homeless right here in Tobago. Lovely Tobago where we are right now. He has been a pivotal figure in both the sporting and media landscapes of Tobago, but he's also been a band leader, king of Juve, winning Band Individual of the Year many times, and also been involved in the Festival Heritage and Committee, as well as chairman and CEO, correct? There we are. As the owner and managing director of Radio Tambrin, a prominent radio station here in Scarborough, he has successfully fused his passion for sport with his media expertise. His career in sports management began when he recognized the need for structured athletic programs here in Tobago. Utilizing limited resources, George developed elite sports programs that significantly elevated the performance of local athletes, enabling him to participate successfully in national and international competitions. His commitment to sport has led to his organizing of high-profile events, including FIFA U-17 World Cup and the Carifta Games, showcasing Tobago on the global stage. In recognition of his contributions, George was awarded the Chaconia Medal Silver, a prestigious honor in Trinidad and Tobago, which highlights his impact not only in sports but also in media. He views this accolade as a platform to inspire others in the community to pursue excellence in their endeavors. As chairman of the task force for the Tobago leg of the Tobago 2023 Commonwealth Youth Games, George played a crucial role in promoting youth development through sports. His leadership has strengthened the community's engagement in athletics, fostering a new generation of talented athletes. Now, Radio Tambrin was founded to provide a comprehensive mix of entertainment, information, and music. It has become a cornerstone of the Tobago media landscape. With an enthusiastic team that includes professionals like Latoya Thomas and Carol Leacock, the station broadcasts a diverse range of programming that reflects the culture and interests of the local community. Under George's direction, the station has played an important role in shaping public discourse, which includes the downtrodden, exemplifying his commitment to community development, and celebrating Tobago's rich culture. Now we're going to dig deep a little bit into Mr. George Leacock. Stay tuned. Now we're going to speak to George. And again, thank you, Caribbean Airlines, for getting us here. What inspired you to establish the first division? You said you didn't establish it, right? You became the first employee, but the first division of sport in Tobago.
Let me just run with it, right?
Yes.
On graduating from university, I went to school in Canada, went to Dalhousie. the Tobago House Assembly had just gone through some radical upgrades and some areas of responsibility that were previously dealt with nationally were delegated to the Tobago House of Assembly, one of them being sport. So it was necessary to set up a department of sport. And I was maybe the fortunate individual who was the first person employed in that department.
Was that something you studied in
I studied
college?
physical education.
Okay.
So went about doing that and literally had to start from scratch, including recruiting all staff in most cases, recruiting staff and training staff, and then establishing programs. We started off with a very small group, 5 or 6 people. Then we were lucky to get the legendary Bertil Sinclair to come and join us. Bertil Sinclair is, of course, our former national soccer coach who is credited with creating Dwight York. So me and Coach, as we call him, battled for several years, creating the kind of organization that was focused on, in the first place, grassroots spread of sport, including improving the technical competence of coaches. And then we also initiated elite programs because we immediately realized that to have international successes at all, you had to separate the outstanding athletes from the pack and expose them to enhanced kinds of experiences. We also had the responsibility at the time for guiding, I would say, the process of developing and maintaining recreational facilities. We developed quite a few new facilities in the time. One of the things that we did earn some kudos for was developing facilities where, particularly in those times where funds were hard to come by, where we at the department provided the funding and the URP, that is the Unemployment Relief Program, actually provided the labor for us. So usually in Trinidad and Tobago, the URP programs are frowned upon. We were able to, particularly by when we were doing programs in communities, the people who were employed in the URP saw the benefit that would come to their communities. They really enthusiastically logged in to the work, and we were able in particular to put down a number of hard courts, outdoor hard courts for basketball and netball and tennis and that kind of thing during that period. It's very interesting. We had to be creative as well. We lit the first football field in Tobago, and that was at Shaw Park. And the way we were able to do that is we solicited donations of used oil-driven derricks and converted them into light towers and so on. So we did what we had to do in order to be successful.
What has been one of the most rewarding experiences for you in organizing those major events such as FIFA?
Well, FIFA was super interesting and got more interesting than we anticipated, but we had prepared for it. FIFA's tournament in Tobago should have started on a Friday, and 9/11 occurred on the Monday. And we were responsible for the American team in Tobago. 9/11 happened, and we were due to start football in 3 or 4 days. FIFA was asking, are we going to continue with the tournament? And then I think after about 24 hours or so, I think the world response is that we were not going to be stopped. So we are going ahead. But fortunately, one of the persons I had selected as an advisor to the committee was a retired police officer. He's deceased now, Cephas Mark, who was the country's leading anti-terrorism expert. So we had put in place all the security measures that are actually normal for things like that. When the incident actually occurred, the American team was at practice. So all the military type things started happening. A team was dispatched to hold them at practice because nobody knows what's happening in the world at this point. And then the hotel was searched and made secure and so on. And then they were returned to the hotel. And then we started, getting information from all over. Wow. So that was very interesting. We had the team from Nigeria here. We had the United States, we had Trinidad and Tobago, and we had the French team. And in fact, France and Nigeria met in the final of the competition. So we did have the better part of it. Right. The Dwight York Stadium is capable of about 7,500 people. But I'm not allowed to tell you how many people we actually had in there right. every day for the duration of the tournament. What was interesting was that the FIFA marked our daily performance on a 10-point scale. And we ended up with, 4 games. So a perfect score would be 40 points. And we actually ended up with 39.5.
Whoa!
And we lost the 0.5 because there was a Nigerian radio station who had a little bit of a problem connecting to the system to start their broadcast back to Nigeria. I'm still upset about it because if somebody had asked me, right. I just simply lent them some equipment from Radio Tambrin and they'd have been fine, but nobody had asked me about it. So that was, I think, overall, being able to do it, being able to get people into the facility and clear the facility. We set targets, clear the facility in less than 45 minutes after the game was over, so people weren't going to be there in lines to ensure that there were enough food vendors, and then fulfilling all of the FIFA requirements, including ensuring that there's no guerrilla marketing in the venue and all that. It's very, very interesting,
what a memory.
but exciting, along every moment.
How do you envision the future of sports and media in Tobago? I mean, is there a role that you're still playing?
Well, I currently advise the THA on sport facility, mainly upgrades and maintenance. And I'm also working very hard on developing sport tourism. Not that we don't have sport tourism, but that we put in place a structure that allows for consistent evaluation of proposals that would allow a measured intervention by the THA that in turn works out to heads in beds from a tourism perspective. But with everything, we must be able to insist on local participation. So not just about having events that people come and participate, but that our local community or local athletes and so on, or officials get involved, so that they are rewarded by the experience. And we have a symbiotic relationship, as it were, with our sports development and tourism.
One of the questions I was going to ask you was, what do you believe is the pathway for more foreign visitors to come in? And when they're in, how does that pathway lead to that community development? Let's put it that way.
Well, sport is an interesting path forward for tourism. It is extremely low cost in terms of marketing. If you have a sporting event and it is being run in conjunction with an international sporting event management company, what they do is they find the guest and you provide the locale. And in a lot of cases, we're particularly blessed. We have more than 35 outdoor recreation grounds. There's a perception in some minds that all of these grounds must be at the level of a Dwight York Stadium. That's not what we have found in the field. Teams, players, parents, visitors at various levels want the opportunity to participate in their sporting discipline in exotic locations. And we are an exotic location, we bless. And then when you talk about the possibility of things like cycling, road races, marathons, and so on, you realize there's not really the need for physical facility. We already have roads. And we have quite a few hills, as you may have noticed.
Yes. So now let's look at, how does your work with Tambrin raise awareness about the challenges faced by the homeless and the needy in the community?
I always think it's important that when you discuss some of these international topics, that they are contextualized locally. And I'll give you an example. We've had, time after time, these task force about child employment or child labor, child labor and so on. And contextually, you could almost say it doesn't really exist in Tobago. Or where it exists in a completely different format than happens in the rest of the world. For example, I grew up in my father's store, and I was demonstrating how to operate a radio and testing out irons and electric bulbs and so on before you buy them. Right? At 7 years old. That wasn't child labor.
No.
Right? First of all, I wasn't compelled to do it. Right? And for most families on the island that have a sort of family tradition of being business people, those kids are in the stores and in the shops and all that, in their free time and doing what they need to do, really learning the trade from the very best. However, we have a tradition in Tobago where, particularly because of the way that Tobago was emancipated, that a significant part of the Tobago population still owns land. And the tradition of supplementing income from the land directly by way of agriculture or supplementing the income by building a 2-storied house. The children downstairs, and when the children move out, renting those rooms. A lot of people who you see in the public service every day, they go home to even sometimes a fishing boat, or things that are even more lucrative than their primary job. But they do hold on to the primary job because maybe the market size doesn't sustain the other job, and it works for them. They find a formula doing that. The problem is when people fall beneath all of those cracks, then there is a sort of a wall of silence around those who don't fall within those systems. That's one. I also think that with everything going faster, with the Tobago population being very migratory, our population level has remained the same for a long time. You ending up with a lot of cases of what some people might call elder neglect, because it's amazing when people migrate, they freeze things at the point when they left.
Right.
So I left Mom and she was 55 and hale and hardy, and she was walking to the post office and cooking for herself and all that kind of thing. And I've been abroad for 15 years. And Mom is now,
70.
getting down in age. She's 70, right? And she can't do those things anymore. So we have that. And then particularly I have seen parents who migrate as a first migrating person and sending back home the barrel children. Right?
That's, yeah.
They, in my view, particularly challenged. I did spend 1 year at the Mount St. George Youth Camp as a director and dealing with the young men there. It was one of the phenomena. And then there's simply a significant number of people who, for any number of reasons, are poor and cannot meet their day-to-day expenses. A lot of it is sometimes drug-related. There's some housing-related issues.
So therefore, Radio Tambrin, it goes in and helps them. How do you?
We have always been very pragmatic at Radio Tambrin. And we support a number of events and a number of charities and a number of issues related to children. And we sometimes try to do it in creative ways. I can tell you about one now because we have decided to discontinue it and to achieve the objectives in a different way. We used to have something called a Santa Claus parade. And it was a parade through the streets of Scarborough, Santa Claus, and everything else. And there were children in the parade. What was not public about it is that we had people who would advise us.
Right.
And the children in the parade were not all randomly selected. So we would have a school, for example, participate in the parade. But that, in a sense, served as a cover for children who had special needs and had an opportunity to participate in the parade like everybody else.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Without there being any possibility of a stigma.
Exactly.
Or anything like that associated to what we're doing. The unfortunate reality, I think, it has become a little bit overblown, and everybody is running to have a Christmas party for children and a Christmas party for children and a Christmas party for children. So we had to strategically pull back and look at another way of meeting those persons specifically. We also don't really participate in the hype. I'm aware of, some organizations that they have, charitable dinners and all that kind of stuff. For us, we just go direct to the source.
Right. What role do you believe media can play in advocating for the rights and needs of the marginalized?
I think the media has to maybe stop going in the opposite direction. There is, in my view, too much of blaming the victim. I'm not aware of anywhere else but Trinidad and Tobago where after somebody has been shot, be it by the police or by some miscreant, that the media rushes off to interview the parents while those persons are at their lowest.
Right.
And then the answer, we have this thing, so you have to say, well, he's a nice boy or whatever. And I am screaming at the television or whatever it is. What do you expect her to say?
Right.
It's her son.
Right.
Right? But I'm not aware that any of those parents have been transporting AK-47s into the country or large shipments of drugs. I think that it is legitimate and reasonable for the media to say to a parent that you have to take up your parental responsibilities.
Right.
You have to do your best by the way of your children.
Right.
You have to teach them and bring them up in the right way. That's legit. But you can't take on as a national policy blaming mothers of sons who have been shot
Right.
for all of the national problems that we have.
Right.
Right? It is also, in my mind, important too that people understand little things. Like, I could share a lesson I got from my father. I was watching television with him during the news, and there was this lady who was complaining, screaming, that she hadn't been paid from some government program and she doesn't have the wherewithal to take care of her children and all that kind of stuff. And she was wearing a number of gold chains and earrings and that kind of stuff. So me, I suppose in my youthful ignorance, said, well, look, she have all them gold chains and thing, how come she can't take care of her children? And my father said, stop, no. He said, are you aware that there's still parts of Trinidad and Tobago where people can't get a bank account? So if you can't get a bank account, in truth and in fact, you find ways to do a workaround. And the workaround is that you purchase jewelry when you have money. And you And when the money runs low, you take it to the pawn shop.
Correct.
And you have the added benefit of you escape a little bit of escapism from your actual situation because you look pretty.
Right.
With your jewelry and all that. So, overall, I would say that our challenge in Trinidad and Tobago is to become a little bit more realistic in how we view the challenged part of the population. You would hear, police shot some people. And as far as I'm concerned, the primary responsibility of a police officer is to get home safely. And if getting home safely means that he has to shoot somebody, well, that happens. But I don't think it's a point of celebration, either for the policeman or for the general public, or even as how it's depicted sometime in the media.
Right.
And to me, it starts there, that we understand that every one of these lives that we have lost is a potential footballer, lawyer, doctor, who went, or maybe just a potential hardworking garbage man.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Who got pulled in the right direction because of the situation which they found themselves.
What changes in policy then do you think are necessary to improve the support systems for the needy? I mean, you talk about it in terms of media, but...
All right, so as you're aware, I run a talk show in the morning. And oftentimes, my time, 45 minutes after the show, is very related to what happened in the show. And one of the biggest problems that people would call off air privately, want to speak to you please about, is the inflexibility of the system in dealing with people with challenges. The kind of thing that sounds like, yes, we have some funding for what you want to do, but you have to have an ID card. And if you don't have an ID card, then, you have a problem.
Right.
And I'm using that as an example, not necessarily bashing the ID card people, but then more often than not, the process to get this document or whatever is tedious and challenging. I also tend to see a lot of, we in the office, you come to us, as opposed to people going out into the community and observing firsthand the situation that, somebody's going to come to the office and sometimes even have a challenge filling up your forms and that kind of thing. That, to me, over the last 25 years, has been the most consistent thing. In fact, on several occasions, I've had people come with complaints and needing state assistance, and they're not able to get the state assistance, not because they don't qualify, but because the paperwork or some administrative thing doesn't go right.
But that being the case, is there some sort of link between what they need and what the policymakers, do you see yourself as that link, or is there some other?
Well, I do recall that one youth group, a police youth group in Roxborough, several years ago they published, and I think they should be encouraged to publish it again, a manual for accessing government services. That really helped people out. you want to get a birth certificate, this is the form you have to fill out, or this is what you have to do, you want to get this, you want to get that, you want to get a driver's license and all that kind of thing. I think that kind of advocacy would help. And then I suppose that with all of these things going digital, it's going to be easier on the one hand, but then, there's a digital divide between those who have access to things. So some of it could be challenging.
What was the name of that group that did that manual before?
Oh, it's the Roxborough Police Youth Club.
That's Roxford Police Youth Club. Okay. Looking ahead, what long-term solutions do you envision for improving the lives of the marginalized?
So, both at the level of juvenile correction, the senior prisons, and drug rehab, the services are not adequately provided in Tobago or not provided at all. There's no residential drug program in Tobago. There used to be one, and for the most part, it was driven by private citizens with state support. But then the person passed on, and recruiting additional individuals with the passion for that kind of work to go along with the training and everything else hasn't happened. There's not a juvenile detention center in Tobago, and there's not one, and even the Scarborough prison, right, has been condemned to some degree. So juvenile offenders have to be taken to Trinidad. And the first thing that happens is the separation from their families. They can't have visits and that kind of stuff. I was part of a group, the Youth of Tobago, who used to go to Trinidad, to the prison, and you'd simply take things like writing supplies and all that kind of thing. And the guys would be absolutely gleeful because they're seeing a familiar face, they're hearing a familiar voice. And the same thing happens in the prison. Most people who get into that prison grinder out of Tobago, you start off with some silly 2-month or 3-month sentence for nipping somebody's gas cylinder or the hose or something like that. And then you go to, like the fellas call it, the big house in Trinidad, separated from the family. And I'm saying that, and I'm not necessarily making this a Trinidad Tobago thing at all, right? But you're separated from your family. Even times I've heard of fellas being released. And by the time they release, you get a little bit of money. And that money gets you, if you particularly get out of prison, you'll probably go and buy the biggest roti you could find and that kind of stuff.
And then the money's gone?
And then you have no money to get back to Tobago. You know what I mean? Yeah. So those are things at the administrative developmental level,
right,
that must be dealt with. And the individuals and must be seen as a priority. You see, if a school for normal children is not available, the parents would protest.
Right.
Right? They'd march around the school and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
If there's no place for people who have run afoul of the juvenile delinquency laws, who's going to protest?
Right.
Right? Who's going to make that noise? And I don't want to leave this segment without mentioning the youth camp.
Right.
Because I had the personal experience there. The youth camp was a residential trade center. And it went significantly beyond trade. The residential element is extremely important. I sometimes call a year and a half or so that I worked at the youth camp, if not the most rewarding, certainly the most revealing part of my work experience. The youngsters that we had, some of them were placed there by the court.
The what?
They were placed in the youth camp by the court as an alternative to juvenile. Some of them went through the regular high school system and did not graduate with the 5 O-levels. Some of them did. Some of them were interested in military careers. So they went to the youth camp, which was, in a sense, rigidly organized in that structure. And they thrived in that kind of situation. And they came from all parts of the country. They lived together in the camp. They found their way to live together in the camp. And they learned trade. I have had my daughters going to university and receiving a phone call saying, I see a Leacock name in my building. I said, your building? And turned out he was the building supervisor for one of the dormitories on the campus of the university that my daughter was attending. And this was one of my trainees at the youth camp.
Lovely.
We've had trainees from there who go on to work for the United Nations.
Really?
We have trainees, Inspector Ricardo Morris from Trinidad, in the police service and all of that. And the youth camp provided a very practical, I find a low cost, when I look at the budget that we used to do it for, backup route for boys and girls who didn't necessarily thrive in the regular high school system. And provided an important thing for the nation, where we were turning out tradesmen, you know what I mean, out of each camp 150 or so a year, right? In useful skills like carpentry, masonry, electrical wiring, auto mechanics and all that kind of stuff. I was stopped for whatever reason, and I think it's something that should be reinstated because it's a kind of stopgap measure that we need.
Are you guys listening? Trinidad and Tobago, are you listening? Thank you guys for being here. On that note, we're going to stop this first conversation with Mr. George Leacock. Thank you very much, Mr. Leacock, for being here. Thank you, Caribbean Airlines, for getting us here. Thank you to Cheese, our OTC team. And as I normally say, please like, follow, share, subscribe. And when you're on your beat, stay on the sunny side of the street safely. Be health conscious, kind to one another. And don't forget to give thanks for the little and big gifts as we strive through this beautiful life. Stick with us. Get on the membership page to hear the other side of this conversation. Mr. George Leacock, thank you very much. Yes.